Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learning DITA Live 2020. This is our final session of the day. I'm Elizabeth Patterson, and I'm going to be moderating this presentation today. Charlie Andrews is going to be presenting Centralized Metadata Management Simplifies Data Implementation.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Charlie. Learning DITA Live is brought to you by Scriptorium, the content strategy experts. Since 1997, Scriptorium has helped companies manage, structure, organize, and distribute content in an efficient way. If you're trying to figure out how the DITA model can best support your content or you're setting up a DITA system, please contact us and we would love to work with you. LearningDITA.com and Learning DITA Live would not be possible without the help from our sponsors, so thank you. A couple of housekeeping things before we begin the presentation. Attendees are going to be muted during this webcast, but we still want your input during the session. So if you have any questions that come up, you can type those into the chat module and send those questions to us, and we will get them answered for you at the end of the session. If you would, go ahead and locate that module now in the GoToWebinar interface so that you know where it is. Also, be on the lookout during our question and answer portion of the presentation for a link to our evaluation survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass things off to Charlie. Charlie, are you ready?
I am just waiting for the ability to share my screen.
All right, I'm making you a presenter now. All right, you should be good to go.
Okay, let's see. I'm not sure which screen is being shown. Hold on.
I'm seeing your PowerPoint interface, so.
All right, and hopefully this is the full screen. Is that correct?
Yes, you're good to go.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. All right, good. Well, first of all, thank you, Elizabeth and Scriptorium for giving me the opportunity to share with the folks today on Learning DITA Live. This will be the second year that Ovitas has been involved in this and that I've been doing a presentation. We really appreciate the chance to talk with everybody. And welcome, I guess, to the last session of the second day, and thank you everybody for hanging in there to attend this. I want to do a couple things today. First of all, the main part of my topic for today is basically how to help facilitate and implement DITA by really having a wonderful way to manage metadata as part and parcel of the DITA environment. And when I say implement DITA, I don't mean from scratch implementing it as if you're implementing a content management system, but actually using DITA and having the ability to create intelligence around all of the DITA information that you're creating, and then maintain that intelligence through the life cycle of it, including from the time of its inception all the way through to the delivery of it out to the world. So in order to do that, some of the things we're going to talk about today are what does metadata management look like, and especially what is centralized metadata management, and what does that mean? Before I jump in, for those of you who don't know Ovitas, just a very quick bit about our company. Ovitas was founded in 2004. We're based out of Burlington, Massachusetts. We're an employee-owned company. We're in both the USA and Europe. We are deep experts in content lifecycle solutions, especially structured XML. And since probably about 2008, we have been almost exclusively working in component content management systems and the DITA standard. And we have very, very deep knowledge in that. We also work with knowledge and research portals, user experience, and we create those environments, which are a nice complement to the ability to have a centralized content management system, a content factory, if you will, and then publish, package, and distribute information out to channels, including portals and knowledge systems and things like that. We also work heavily with workflow and with content distribution. In the US, our specialties are content management solutions, and we have all the professional services, consulting, implementation. We also create our own software packages. We also implement portals, and we do product development here, do client operations and customer support. In Budapest, in Hungary, we also have a sister company that overlaps for Europe in some of the same disciplines, but it also includes things like content migration from legacy content into DITA, into content management systems, developing user experiences for the web, and of course, client operations and support. So we can support a customer throughout the US and through Europe. We have a number of member organizations that we belong to, including Learning DITA, and we're happy to be a part of that. Okay. More and more, we're living in a world where things are starting to talk to other things and to us. Everybody knows this. If you've got an Alexa or anything like that at home, or Google, you know things are talking to you and they're talking to other things. So the Internet of Things is here, it's growing, and it's evolving. Interestingly, manufacturers are offering a number of different products, and you can get coffee makers, you can get refrigerators, you can get home equipment, but also you can get giant turbines and engines and other major pieces of equipment, industrial equipment, that now are connected and talking not only to the manufacturing process, but to call centers and to customers, et cetera. It's growing. It's still largely unconnected, interestingly, in the large industry of manufacturing industry, but it is growing. But what it points out is that there is a huge complexity of information that needs and is going to require continual advancement in the way you manage that information and how you create it and how you deliver it and how people access it. So now I know you've been on this webinar for 2 days, and you're going to be on for yet another day, hopefully. So in some senses, I'm a little bit preaching to the choir here, but I think that some summary is nice and is appropriate. First of all, XML has been around now for a while, and its benefits are very well known. And over time, any number of standards have evolved for different vertical markets or disciplines. DITA, of course, and then things like S1000D for aerospace, DocBook, Prism for publishing, XBRL for financial reporting. The advantages that you get by using XML in structured content are very plain. They're reuse. They're the ability to recombine content and publish brand new instances where you write once and you use many times, and you have control over all that content. And you can publish to anything that meets the glass or even to paper. You can target and profile delivery for audiences or roles or permissions, right? But what really drives all of these benefits? Right, that's the question that we want to talk about a little bit today, right? DITA content is set up to be smart. And the delivery of content is evolving, and it's getting very creative into what goes out and is consumed by the people in the general public. But it's interesting that in the manufacturing world, for instance, the content delivery is still heavily PDF based. HTML and PDF seem to be the main deliverables that are out there right now. One of the things that we see constantly is that when content is packaged and delivered in PDF type formats in support of, say, a portal out there that's going to be doing service, and you're going to have to look and try to see if you can troubleshoot something, that content in PDF loses much of the intelligence that you've gotten by using DITA and by applying things like metadata to that. And the content management system, CCMS, and I know we just had a presentation on component content management systems, and investing in that and investing in DITA is really a major step for any organization. And it's a planful step. It's a monetary investment. And the best way to take advantage of that is to be able to leverage everything that you do in that system for the best possible outcome. So content people and the consumers out there, they need researchers or field servers or call center folks, whatever they are, parts managers, they need knowledge bases that are intelligent. and they have contextual supporting content and data to help find answers, and they need to have that so that they can help solve problems. Okay, I have set up 3 poll questions for the day, and the first one I'm going to turn over to Elizabeth now is, do you use a component content management system? And I hope this graphic isn't making you hungry.
Let me pull up this poll. One moment. All right, here we go.
I feel like I should have some music in the background while people are thinking about this.
Got about 15 more seconds here.
All right.
So if you haven't already, go ahead and vote in the poll. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Looks like we've got 47% say yes and 53% say no.
Wow, that's great. First of all, I think that that's wonderful that it is a good high percentage of people who are saying yes. And it's a very interesting statistic that the majority are not today using a component content management system. And thank you for the results of that. That will help in the discussion as we move forward. Okay. I wanted to cover 4 basic concepts today. And these are things that sort of an organizing principle, if you will, to my talk for the rest of the time that we have together. First of all, I want to talk about metadata. And metadata is the information about information, and this is a very basic concept that we all know. But I'd like to take that further and talk about metadata basics, about metadata management and content and metadata as treated as peers, packaging of metadata as product, and then talk about the ways that metadata can be used in the real world, things like data models and maybe data-aware delivery platforms. So those are the 4 things that I wanted to cover in today's talk. Okay, I apologize if this is very basic for people who are advanced in using a metadata, but in the nature of learning DITA Live, I wanted to make sure that we are covering the basics for those of you who are not well versed in this topic. So what is metadata? Metadata describes and categorizes content as information about information, and how that content lives and how it relates to your organization, your products, customers, and then how it may be used within a component content management system to manage your content. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I think what's important to this particular bullet item is that it's your organization, not just products and not just content, but metadata describes a lot of things even outside the content management system. You can have taxonomies that describe your corporate relations of all of your products or all of your marketing and all of your sales and all of the different areas of support and things like that. All of those things are metadata and can be gathered together in support of the types of things that you're trying to publish, right? So the major categories of metadata pretty much are agreed to have 3 different categories: descriptive, structural, and administrative metadata. For those of you not familiar with this, descriptive metadata is the things you would normally think of. Who wrote something? What's its title? What's the date it was done? What product family or model or part number or things like that? It describes the particular piece of content that you're looking to do. Structural metadata, it basically talks about the relationship between different DITA content topics or chunks and how they should be assembled or packaged. Structural metadata may be used in DITA maps and things like that. Administrative metadata may include things like geo-market or location, what version, what files, what rights management, what permissions does a piece of information have. Okay. Now, within those categories, metadata takes all sorts of different types, and there's just a wide continuum of purposes. Some of them business, technical, or operational. And as an example, audience metadata may be included, and that may describe who should see this particular piece of content. Is it an internal audience inside your organization? Is it external for your customers or subscribers? Is it a company or a customer? Is it geographic region? What expertise level and the like? So if I'm a very new person in looking at information about a product and I'm supposed to be servicing it, I may get a very simple, capable level of information about how to approach something. If I'm an expert, I may get exposed to a whole different set of content, and that might be based on the metadata that's in the audience category for this, right? So content-based metadata helps do that kind of profiling. Knowledge model, which we're going to talk about, based metadata, basically is an organizing principle about how to get to that knowledge. The two of those combined can be used to deliver the highest particular level of intelligence around the content that you want to distribute. So here is somewhat of a theme for today. Content and metadata should be equals. They should be peers. And in a component content management system, a good component content management system allows for all of the different things, the standard things that you would think about treating content. It keeps versions, it keeps history. There's an audit trail for it. All the different ways to roll back an earlier version or promote an earlier version or roll back one, etc. Content is very often managed in a content management system through targeted workflows. Maybe interactive editing workflows and approval workflows, review workflows, things like that. The typical cycle of the creating and managing content in order to package it for delivery. Also, translation and localization of content is a very important activity within a component content management system, right? So you have interactive person-to-person, group-to-group type activities, and you have automated processes like the authority to release content and then publish it out, right? Traditionally, metadata has not been included in this type of management, the management that's available to content. But there's no reason not to treat metadata just like content. And you can see my little snowman, and that's because we're in the Northeast and it's typically very cold right now. So metadata should be treated like content, right? Here we're talking about centralized metadata management. Many content management systems provide the ability to have metadata, create metadata, and apply that metadata in the model of content within the content management system. The concept we're talking about today is actually taking that metadata management out of the content management system and have it as a separate but layered application on top of a content management system, allowing you some flexibility to reach outside to gather and to use metadata from the broader sense of an organization, right? So this is what we would call metadata services, a centralized metadata management, right? If it's layered on top of a CCMS, this application that is metadata management can then take advantage of all the things the CCMS does for things like content. Each value of metadata in the collection that you're putting together can be versioned. You can keep history and an audit trail of it. You can have creation and updates and manage that via workflow. Often, and I'll ask this poll question in a little bit, metadata is something where it's, oh, I need a new keyword, I need a new term, I need a new something, and I think I'll just invent that. And that's very nice, but if everybody in an organization starts to invent their own metadata, pretty soon you're going to have a very chaotic environment that you have to live in. So often metadata is curated, and it could be an individual or a group that does that work. And if they are able to use the same tools as the people that are subject matter experts that are using content management systems, that will really, really facilitate the management and of your metadata and your metadata models, right? So creation and updates managed through workflow. Metadata is often translated, especially in support of products that are distributed globally. Um, and localization of metadata can be managed in the exact same way as you would localize or translate your content, right? In addition, you can apply status to individual values of metadata. I have some examples here. A new piece of metadata may be one that's not available generally for authors to use. It's going through a process of approval and eventually will be made active. And when active, it may be, for example, available to somebody in an authoring tool like Oxygen, who can then apply that metadata or add it to a map or do whatever they need to do. Also, deprecated may be a status where now I have metadata that's out in the field and it's been released, but we've decided that we're no longer going to use that particular metadata. So while it may still be out there, we're not going to make it available for anything new that's being created and sent out, all right? In a centralized metadata management solution, one of the things that you can do is package metadata like you would package a product out of a content management system. One of the types of packages that you can create from a central system like this is subject schemes. Now, subject schemes are used to add values for the authoring environment, and it makes the ability for authors to say, look, I've got a set of values here in terms that I can use, and they're normalized so that if I use them, everybody's using them, and we can have a way to normalize everything that we're doing, and we're not having different types of terms out there. An example of that might be, I might have different terms for Europe, for EMEA, than I might have for US for particular products or product sets, all right? Also, packaging of information that comes out in your content management system environment for things like images or PDFs or multimedia, where you can describe all of those things, but you're using a central place to manage all of the metadata and then delivering that as a package into the content management system for everybody to use. All right. There's a concept called DITA which allows values to be used to drive the way that you want to produce content. DITA is also often used in profiling for the particular audience permissions, as we talked about a little earlier, and those values are chosen so that when you go through the publishing process, the output is targeted to a particular audience. That's often a very, very difficult thing to manage, especially if there are many, many DITA files that are out there. It's possible to have a conundrum where you say, I've got 1,000 values. I only want this one. So in many cases, you can't just say, I want the one. You have to actually discount all of the 999 values in order to have one. But it's possible with packaging to be able to have a very simple UI that allows you to say, oh, that's the only DITA thing that I want. I'm going to ignore the rest that are out there. And you will build a lot of efficiencies into the organization and management of these things like subject schemes, models of your multimedia metadata, and constructs like DITA vals. On the output side, the same metadata packages can be set up and delivered to portal environments, for instance, and they can become things like a data model. And a data model in the portal environment is essentially the master organizing principle that can give you a hierarchy of content in a portal. We'll take a look at that very briefly in a bit. And it also facilitates search in any kind of knowledge portal. The data model, actually, the metadata are provided to do things like metadata search out there and facilitate that environment. Also, you can package the metadata in as part of taxonomies that are delivered to the portal. And the taxonomies can help say, look, I'm this audience, I'm internal, or I'm an external audience, so that the type of content that gets delivered to me and the search capabilities that I have are in this world of a taxonomy. And you can have multiple taxonomies. And a taxonomy, at its simplest, just organizes information in metadata, in the metadata that describes it, and puts it out there so people can access that model. All right. And taxonomies can be high level versus granular. And a really good example of that is if I'm trying to figure out why my brakes are smoking, it may be that one system with very granular types of metadata may take me right to a place where those little brake calipers may be doing something wrong. But it also may be that there's also something wrong with the axle. I wouldn't know that if I was at a very granular level. But if I had a taxonomy that let me have a top-down view of the entire rear assembly of a car, then it might actually better help me in determining how I can drill down to what might be wrong or not wrong with that. And of course, the organizational metadata or audience metadata we talked about earlier can also separate things into things like product versus the geographic market that those products are going to. All of these can be packages that are coming from a centralized metadata management application. Okay. So again, what's a subject scheme and what's DITA-val? And just making a very quick assumption that some people may not be completely familiar with these terms at a very high level, a subject scheme just allows for you to define specific values for attribute metadata, and that means DITA attributes that have, well, DITA attributes can have text value, any text value. And the subject scheme will say that to authors, wait a second, rather than using random text values in your attribute here, use these values, like a product name or an error code. XML editor applications present these, the subject scheme, they present the choices. You know, right click on something, you can get a list of the valid values that you can use while you're in the authoring environment. And that helps keep things consistent across your technical information, for instance. DITA-val files we talked about briefly, they provide specific values, use them in filtering or profiling content. It's during the publishing process, and it means that the right content gets delivered based on your chosen values, so that if you want a pop-up toaster but not a toaster oven, a subscriber but not free access, those people are, those things like a subscriber but not free access are targets, and you can then tailor the content that comes from one source to be specific to that particular audience. Okay. We talked about data models, but they're also called knowledge models. And today I'm kind of using a manufacturing example because I wanted to just not keep things very just you know, open, but sort of look more at specific examples to be able to target a little bit more. So basically a data model or a knowledge model is packaged metadata. And the knowledge model defines the relationships between products or audiences, content, codes, whatever you have that you need to be able to put into your knowledge base, right? In this world, we're talking a little bit right now, focusing somewhat on product diagnostics, that kind of a knowledge model, all right? And they may be based on anything out there. The organizing principle of your site that you're presenting to the public or to your consumers can be set up in any number of ways. One way might be, oh, this one's oriented around product errors or fault codes, but it also might be around symptoms or the market served. So you have the flexibility with data models to organize content on portals in just about any way that makes sense for your business model. So the knowledge model as it's published to something like a knowledge portal or service portal, it becomes the framework for content delivery. It becomes the framework and organization for search and for the actual organization of the content on the site. We'll take a look at a little bit of that in a second. Okay. So in this, the data model becomes the content structure in portals, and it supports filtering and search. So if you're looking at the picture that just popped up, on the left side of that, you're going to see the hierarchy of content for this particular knowledge portal. The data model is actually dictating how that is going to be showing up. And the metadata that goes along with that in the full text are going to be facilitating the search as people are navigating around this knowledge portal. Okay. You have things in manufacturing for products in the field where you might have guided troubleshooting or decision trees or things like that that help walk service people through repair processes. Those types of things are also part of the data model. Those are related to all of the other content with the goal of being able to deliver contextual information, that is DITA, with a package of metadata that it says, if I'm sitting here and this thing is smoking and I go down this decision tree, I can immediately have access to specific information that helps me figure out what to do, whether it's a repair routine or whether it's a manual or a product information bulletin or things like that, okay? So what we're talking about here is just content delivered in DITA to DITA-aware portals or applications, and they support activities out in the field and give you context information as you need it. So for those of you who like pictures, what does this whole environment maybe look like very quickly? From left to right, you have authors and knowledge workers that are out there taking and creating content. They're using workflow, they're using a component content management system, working with DITA and XML content, but also at the same time working with metadata and the metadata models. All of those combined and packaged, and using things like the DITA Open Toolkit and the ability to use the centralized metadata management applications and send them out to the world, to what meets of the glass, if you will, the online portals or laptops, tablets, and things like that. Workflow plays a very important role in both interactive and automated processes here. The ability to deliver capabilities in the field of knowledge to offline clients for those who need to be remote. And then ultimately, the ability to get feedback in from consumers of all the information that's there and create a loop that goes from creation all the way back to the people that created it in the first place with comments and things from the field. So that's just a little bit of a picture of the overall environment where both DITA content and metadata play a role. So here's my poll question number 2. Do you have a person or a group inside your organization that's responsible for curating your metadata?
All
And
right.
I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I will go ahead and start that poll. In about 15 more seconds. So if you haven't already voted
Okay.
in the poll, please do that. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. We've got about 39% that say yes and 61% that say no.
Oh, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for your input. This harkens back a little bit to the comment I made earlier about metadata. If metadata describes your information, and you have the ability to create any metadata that you want without any discipline around it, you could end up with a very chaotic environment. Somebody who is responsible for or a group that's responsible for curating your metadata essentially gives you some control in a broader sense around an organization or around a product set or a product family, so that you have consistency across the board. If you do that, it facilitates not only the authoring environment and your marketing message, but it also facilitates translation management and everything else that gets involved, because you start using terms that are consistent, and that builds efficiencies into the way you can do things like translate information. So we believe at Ovitas that having somebody to curate or a group to curate your metadata sort of as a central place to be responsible for that is a really good thing. Okay. We talked a lot about metadata and its uses and things like that, along with DITA and DITA content. Let's talk about some tools maybe and a couple of examples of tools that are out there. And I'm going to use the two examples of a standalone tool and an integrated tool. The first one we probably all know and love. And the first one is Excel. It's just, this is the sample Excel file. I'm sure everybody out there at some point is either now or has in the past used Excel to manage setting up the relationships within your content, and if you're using these types of metadata models, the relationships within the metadata. So I've got several sort of screenshots of a particular knowledge model metadata example in Excel. The first one, you can tell at the top, you have different things. This one happens to be an error code, and it allows you to set up multiple language. I just picked German and English in this particular one. You have concepts. Each concept, and this is remembering that a DITA topic can be any length and contain any content that is valid DITA. So it can be a string of software for a software interface. It could be a single error code that has a bunch of other information about it to help explain it, or it could be a topic that is a chapter size thing that you would see in a book. In this case, we have error codes. Those are individual concepts, those are individual topics, and they have labels, and they could be part of a taxonomy. They have particular synonyms, and they have multilingual. All of these things are built in the Excel file, and the ultimate goal of this, as you see the three tabs that we go through, is to package this Excel file and then upload it in some sense to be consumed either by a component content management system, or especially in some like a service portal where all this information should be up and be able to be then shown to people that are coming on to use the particular service portal. Another example of this is content topics, and these are more the traditional things that we're seeing certainly around DITA, the familiar types of things. So here are brakes and componentry and cylinders and electrical information and fuel types, things like that. This metadata relationship table sets up the interrelationships between the audiences, the different packaging that you want to use, all of those types of things. So it's a way to capture this model. Metadata, like a DITA schema or document type definition, is a living thing. It's not ever just static. It always grows. Things come on, things come off. And so you have to treat it like a living thing and hopefully have tools that allow you to do that as well. Here's one for audience. We talked about audience before. So in this particular case, it's all the same types of capabilities, but now the concepts are, what is an operator, an owner, technician, etc. And this allows you, again, just to set up relationships. I may have 40 languages that I'm going to. You can see in this case that an Excel file might get fairly extensive if you are translating everything into 40 languages and setting up synonyms for all of those types of languages. It can be quite extensive. Okay, so this is more of a manual model. It certainly can be shared with people. It certainly could go through a workflow if you'd like, but in a sense, it's Excel and it's a fairly manual way of doing things, typically more than one person at a time. Now let's talk about what does a metadata management application look like. All right. So this, now I have screenshots of what a centralized management application looks like. On the very left-hand side of the screen, what you're seeing is a component content management system and its hierarchy of content and information. On the right side of the screen is a user interface that allows individuals or groups to collaborate on the creation and the management of specific metadata. So they have the type of the label of this metadata, which goes all the way down to back over to the left side and is sort of gray highlighted in the hierarchy, and all of the different components that might be part of this. So rather than have an Excel file, I now have application screens that I can fill in, and I have drop-down menus. I have a number of different things that allow me to facilitate creating this content and this information. This information can then be sent through workflows. We're going to talk about that in a second, and managed in the same way that you might manage content in a CCMS. So here is a sample metadata management that goes through workflow, for instance, as a process. In a workflow, this is our version of a workflow interface, somebody's inbox, and what I can see here is that I have five workflows that are in process. 3 of them are around working in some manner with metadata. And I want to take a look at quickly what that might look like. So from an edit metadata workflow, I might have metadata editorial workflow, which is this thing. It has a job name, has the capability of saying, look, we need to revise metadata, we need to work on that. Let's put a workflow together. We'll incorporate the various people who need to be involved. We'll attach whatever the metadata is through the centralized application. We'll package everything together so that people can comment and go through the same type of process that they would generally use when they were working on DITA content in a content management system. Okay. Now, this also may need to be translated. So here I have the screen that allows me to pick and choose all the different variations of language that I may need to have. This can help automate, unlike the Excel file, this can help automate the translation management of metadata just as you would content by doing things like, for instance, we have an integration with XTM Cloud. So we can automate the process of gathering all the metadata as well as the content, presenting that out to XTM and for management, and then managing it when it comes back in to the CCMS environment, all through the metadata application that's layered on top. Okay. And below, I just wanted to put a picture of a workflow so that you can see from left to right that there are the little gear things are automated processes, the little people are interactive processes. So the ability to attach things to be able to work with and then actually do the edit and then manage the release of that, how you want to do it, whether you want to send it to translation, whether you want to actually just publish this out, package it for a portal, put it back into your model within the CCMS, et cetera. So this is just an example of how you might use workflow to manage and curate your metadata and have the people that are involved and the permissions to do that be involved in each of these types of workflows. Okay. Okay, that's metadata. But how does it all relate to the DITA content, right? So again, a little bit preaching to the choir, the DITA content can provide substance to, in this case, our diagnostic process in the field, right? It could send out product content sets, guided troubleshooting or decision trees, parts information, software strings that go on board a particular machine out there so that there's an onboard user interface. All of that could be contained and worked on and curated through the component content management system, all right? In this case, if I have people that are creating guided troubleshooting and people that are creating the content in support of that, they can be working together and they can collaborate in one environment in a content management system, right? So the content that goes out in context with the metadata that forms the portal organization principle and search capabilities, that in this environment, that could include things like knowledge articles, parts kits, lookup capabilities, service and parts information, product information bulletins. These are things that if you're in manufacturing, would be very familiar to you. If you're not in manufacturing, they're just content sets that are in support of particular products. And sometimes outside of DITA come the multimedia, including the technical audio and videos and things like that. And as more that we're getting into things like augmented reality, those things play a higher and higher role in the things that are being delivered out to support people in the field or consumers. Okay. So basically what we have in the world out there is sort of this confluence of components coming together. You have an investment in a DITA component content management system that brings you reuse and localization, profiling, right? You can leverage your investment beyond just the traditional content that's managed, the traditional outputs, and keep intelligence. And one of the themes is, how do I keep intelligence that I have given to my DITA, not only in the content, but in the metadata? And we're going sort of to close the conversation today is to talk about the delivery of DITA to DITA-aware targets, all right? So how do you preserve that intelligence? I don't want to send you a PDF if I lose all that information. I want all that information to go out and be available to the consumer so that they get the most intelligent information delivered at the right level, in the right chunks at the right time. So that's the requirement to supply this best content, in this case to a diagnostics process, but in general to any process, any reason that you have. PDF is a popular format. HTML is a popular format. With HTML5, etc., you have more of a capability of delivering additional intelligence. But if you're capable of having DITA XML and metadata together and preserve that right to the portal, then you're providing we think the richest opportunity to build smart information and smart applications. So my poll 3 number question: do you deliver content to searchable platforms such as knowledge portals?
All right,
And
let me get that poll ready.
hopefully everybody knows what 42 means.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. About 15 more seconds, so go ahead and vote on that poll if you have not already. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
And the answer
And
is?
Charlie, 65% have said yes, and 35% have said no.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much for that. That's a wonderful statistic. It's interesting how it's much larger people are delivering to a knowledge portal of content, in that almost 60-40, a little bit more roughly amount, and the people that are contributing or have a component content management system are the smaller portion of that audience as well, which more like a 30-70 type, if I remember correctly, what that ratio was. That's a very interesting statistic. So let's talk a bit about, and this is sort of winding up my presentation today, and I appreciate your patience. What are DITA-aware portals? All right, they're not a new idea. They're static. People are familiar with static portals, delivering information out, having PDFs and things like that, delivering them out. But what's a DITA-aware portal? Well, it's not a new idea. In our experience, DITA-aware knowledge portals have been applied to a number of different markets. We've worked with them in global accounting research and standards organizations, manufacturing, banking, and more. The idea is to create a portal framework that can serve topics at a granular level, coupled with other constructs that you may want to put out there. In the case of manufacturing, maybe it is guidance like decision trees, a multimedia, with search and retrieval capabilities supported by metadata, and then the full text and the intelligence that's within the DITA content. Okay, so I have some examples, and just want to quickly go through those, and then we'll be finished for today. And I know we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm trying to do this so we have some time left over. So here are 2 public portals that are out there. These are ones that Ovitas was directly involved with. One's the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and they're responsible for curating all of the US generally accepted accounting principles that every public company needs to use at times when they're doing auditing or they're reporting financials. And then the other one is a global auditing and accounting firm called Deloitte. Some of you may have heard of them. And a view of what they call their Deloitte Accounting Research Tool, or DART. And I want to take a look at a couple of these. If you'll take a look at Deloitte on the right-hand side, on the lower portion of that, there's a sort of little table of contents that you can use for navigation. And part of that table of contents, I'll blow it up here so you can see it, is what we're all looking at these days, which is cookies notice. And if you've got a portal out there, you have to be concerned right now with making sure, with all the different privacy regulations that are starting in the US and prevalent in Europe, that you have cookies notices and all of those things out there. So I'm sure a bunch of you are actually figuring out, if you haven't already, how to get those onto your site. Well, the cookies notice actually is content. That content looks like this when it's presented on the actual portal. Again, this is all public information. Some of this information is available by subscription only, but this is what's available to the public. So this has been translated through XSLT, and now it's presented nicely on the screen. But behind the scenes, and what makes it of more value and searchable, this particular chunk, is that it does have the actual DITA XML at the server and available to be served up, and you can take advantage of that. And I'm not going to go through this code. I just wanted to show you that there is an example of that sitting there, and the metadata and the content is all combined and available for delivery up at the portal to support the different activities. Okay. So Financial Accounting Standards Board, this is the one I'm particularly interested in, this particular standard. It is the standard for software and revenue recognition and how you actually report the recognition of software if you're a particular company that deals with that. And this is a typical standard for the Financial Accounting Standards Board. It tells auditors and accountants what to do and how to behave and what guidance they should have. And behind the scenes, this is what's driving the display on that screen, which is the actual DITA topics that you're seeing when it gets translated or through CSS or through XSLT and placed on the screen. So I wanted to just show you that this is where the server has DITA sitting at it and promoting that out to the portal. Okay. And here's just one. I'm not going to show you a DITA example of this, but this is one where we are working in the manufacturing environment, and this is where DITA content and metadata are packaged together, and they're coming from a central place, but they're able to be profiled and packaged so that you end up with different areas in your portal. So in this case, there's a parts lookup that's driven by DITA, knowledge articles, troubleshooting, service and repair, product information, repair videos is typically supported by metadata and et cetera. So you can segment out and present in a portal intelligent areas of your content by using the metadata models and the data models that are coming from a centralized metadata management application, right? And so I'm getting to the end. This is the last slide, and I want to say thank you very much. I wanted to leave you with some thoughts to go, if you will. If you're looking at this and based on the polls, you know, some of you may be out there considering, do we want component content management system? Do we want DITA? Do we want to get into this? What about metadata and all the things? So what is your current situation and where do you want to go? Being planful and looking into the future and looking at your goals is very important in whether or not you're going to decide on an investment going down the DITA XML and DITA road. One thing that I will give credit to Scriptorium for, because they planted this in my head and I can never get rid of it now, is that there are millions of tools out there. We have tools, Ovitas has tools, many of the presenters have tools that have talked to you today. But what we would recommend, and we agree, I think, with Scriptorium on this, is that don't pick your tools right away. Go out and understand what your users need. What are your user stories? What are your use cases and requirements? And it's not just a spreadsheet that says, okay, I need to do this widget and how many people will do that. It's really, what do I need to accomplish? And then once you understand that, look for the tools that fit what you need to do rather than you having to fit what you do to the tools that are out there and available, because you will find the tools that fit what you do and can accomplish the things that you need to do, all right? And then consider leveraging, if you've already invested in DITA, if you've already invested in CCMS, consider leveraging your investment by advancing things like metadata management. What other things can you do with the CCMS that's not just oriented around content, but how can you take advantage of that, right? And please consider your people. They go back to your user stories from everywhere, from content creators to your consumers. And as I said in my example of the overall system, the feedback loop and going back again from your consumers back to your creators, back to your subject matter experts, your engineering, whoever it happens to be, right? Think about keeping your smart content smarter and keeping that intelligence wherever it's delivered. Those are the examples of some of the DITA aware portals that we briefly talked about just now, right? Metadata, it's a ruling principle, and it's incredibly important. Managing it and curating it and making it this living thing, a part and parcel of all of your content in the richest possible way, is going to give you the best experience that you will be able to deliver, right? And then just as a final note, it's really okay to start very simply if you're putting your toe into this water. Um, you can boil the ocean if you want to, but it takes a really long time to boil. So you can start simply. You can solve one problem at a time and build on that as a foundation for expanding into however far you want to take your solutions. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much. I appreciate the ability, the time that you've given me. Thank you, Scriptorium. Thank you, Learning Did Live. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you so much, Charlie. And I'm going to leave your slide up here while we ask a couple questions. If you have questions that do not get answered today, you can reach out to experts@learningdita.com, and Caitlin will drop that um, email address into the chat, or you can reach out to Charlie directly, and his email is up here on the screen. So I guess the first question I've got here is it better to have a single person specialize in content and another in metadata curation, or should you look for someone who can do both? Is that reasonable?
Well, that's kind of a holy grail, right? And I would say it's a matter of degree to start with. It depends on how much content and how much metadata you are going to be working with. At the very start, if you have somebody, bless your heart, that has both knowledge of the content and knowledge of the importance of metadata, and they can be there, they can be your super user, that's wonderful. Ultimately, it depends on how broad use I think your DITA XML collection, your content management system, and your audience, your internal audience that creates this are. If you have a staff of 5 people that are doing all the technical information for your company, you can certainly go towards somebody who understands metadata and content together. If you have 200 people, they're geographically disparate, then I would suggest that you create a group that concentrates on the metadata and the standards that you want to use for the DITA as well. That makes sense?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess here's another question. You mentioned earlier something about decision trees. Could you just give a
Yeah.
brief explanation of what those are?
I would be happy to. So I have a decision tree on my wall. A decision tree is nothing more than a step-by-step process that takes you from point A to point B. We've all used decision trees. We use them unconsciously. As you go to the supermarket, you have a mental decision tree as you go up, down one aisle and the other of the things that you're supposed to do. And if you said, oh, I got to do this and didn't get that, I'm going to go back and get it. So I have a decision tree on my wall that's one of my favorites. It says, should I buy a guitar? And some of you may have seen this. And it starts, should I buy a guitar is the question. And it says yes or no. If it says no, why? Is it too expensive? Yes or no. So these are just places where you ask a question, you put in some information, and the tree tells you where to go next. In the case of manufacturing, if you have it's an electrical motor, is the value of the electrical motor greater or lesser than 10 or greater than lesser than 100? If it's 10, do this. If it's 100, do that. So it's nothing more than guidance on how to go from point A to point B. and it can be created in a number of ways. You can use, for instance, oxygen has a sort of a standard for creating decision trees, but that's it in its basic. That for the guitar, it is at the end it says, do you want to die alone? Yes. Then do you want to die alone happily? Yes. Then buy a guitar. You know, the only time you don't want to buy a guitar is if you don't want to die happily. So it takes you to a conclusion. Hopefully that conclusion is either you've fixed it or call the call desk and get some more help.
Okay, great, thanks. And I have one final question here. In the
Mhm.
meantime, while I ask this final question, we are going to post a link to the session evaluation in the chat. So if you would take the time to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. Um, so this final question, explaining this to decision makers will require future thinking business cases to help them see trends in content as a business asset. How can we help decision makers see this as an asset?
So what we're talking about is the decision makers who are going to okay potentially the investment into a content management system. Um, that's a really good question. Um, let me think for just a second.
Yeah, sure.
The ability to deliver to your target audience intelligent information that gives them the best experience is going to ultimately increase the way your company, your organization is viewed by your customers or the constituents who consume your information. At the highest level, the more intelligence that you can deliver your audience, the better your audience is going to like you. Um, the the payback for investing in this things like component content management system, there are studies that are available that are very well documented, not the least of which is things like translation management. If you're manually translating your content now and you're not using a system to manage that process, you're running into massive amounts of duplication and cost, right? And potentially introducing errors into your content. If you're using a managed system to do that, the system is helping you keep consistency, keep errors down, and DITA and XML especially allows you to do things like translate your content at a granular level, at a chunk at a time, and rather than the entire say service manual that might be hundreds and hundreds of pages, you can translate one little topic at a time, and you will dramatically cut costs. Um, Cost cutting is also something as you go up the chain that decision makers like to hear, right? So those are just two areas where you have benefits that you can show. I can add a better likability from my audience out there, from our customers. I can much better manage the cost and the error levels within the content and just deliver a better product.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. I don't see any more questions, so I believe that that concludes this session, but thank you so much for the presentation, Charlie.
Thank you, and I'd be happy to make this available as well. Just let me know how you would like me to do this.
Okay, yeah, so if anyone is interested in the presentation, you can email Charlie directly, and his email address is on the screen, or you can email experts@learningdata.com, and we would be happy to put you in touch with him. But I guess that concludes our session. So we will be back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock a.m. with the Unsung Heroes of DITA with Gretel Kinsey. So thank you all so much for attending today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.